Are you muted?
Nobody can hear me. We'll rewind that. Okay. You wish I was muted, Turbo Hoodie. No one shall mute me. Hi, I'm Gray. I am still the executive director of Worldbuilders, although if the things continue the way they are, that may not be for long. And we are here to have our next in a series of streaming events here as our part of our fundraiser for Heifer International. And we are a geek-focused pass-through charity. We have raised $722,325 as of this point, which is way past our initial goal of $500,000. Thank you so much for your support and help in doing this. When we get to $750,000, we have a stretch goal, which is Hank Green doing a TikTok dance for us. So that is something to work towards. But in the meantime, we wanted to create something to look forward to. And so we've had the benefit of having wonderful people like the ones you see here on the screen come in and do events with us both at 11 o'clock every weekday. Some people have been seen on Pat's stream between 1 and 4 every day. And then we have special events like D&D games, or tonight we're going to have a 1965 Galactic Journey telethon with live performances and things like that going on. So we have a lot of fun stuff going on. Today, we are lucky enough to have a panel on geeky podcasting in this hellscape known as 2020. And we have with us some people that I am absolutely gobsmacked to have these people here because I admire all of them. Merl Lafferty is an award-winning author and Hall of Fame podcaster, the author of the Nebula and Hugo-nominated finalist Six Wakes and the Shambling Guide series, and host of the popular Ditch Diggers and I Should Be Writing podcasts. She also co-edits the Hugo-nominated podcast magazine Escape Pod, which I've been listening to Escape Pod since the very first one, so I'm really thrilled to have you here. Lafferty lives with her husband, daughter, and 2 dogs in Durham, North Carolina, where she runs, plays computer and board games, and bakes bread. Sarah Gouldy started watching Star Trek when TNG premiered in 1987 and has never actually stopped watching, ever. She's watching an episode right now. A Hugo Award finalist for Best Fanzine, Sarah is the editor-in-chief of Star Trek Quarterly. She has appeared on podcasts such as Feminist Frequencies, Picard and Discovery Recaps, as well as Trek panels at Star Trek Las Vegas, DragonCon, WorldCon, WisCon, Geek Girl Con, and others. You can also catch her in the Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind. A longtime friend of the Women at Warp podcast, which is, in my opinion, is the best Trek podcast. She is thrilled to join the crew. She lives in a former arboretum. Join the crew. Listen to me. I'm reading from your bio and the thing. She's also hopefully thrilled to join our crew here. Sarah lives in a former arboretum in Portland, Oregon, and you can see her email up there, Sarah Miyoko, or on Twitter, not email. And finally, my lifesaver, because she agreed to moderate this panel and took it off my plate. In her day job, Liz Brzezinski, did I pronounce that right, Brzezinski?
You did,
okay.
Yeah.
Liz Brzezinski is an attorney specializing in intellectual property. But when she's not wrangling trademarks and copyrights, you can find her cooking elaborate quarantine meals, playing video and tabletop games, or working on podcasts. Specifically, Liz plays Jack in the Unicursity Actual Play podcast, co-hosts the Cooperatives podcast about playing cooperative games with her husband, and is one of an ensemble of co-hosts for the new Party Chat podcast, which applies late-night talk show format to discussions about the hobby of gaming. So as you can see, they are all immensely qualified to talk about podcasting in 2020, and with that, I am going to bow out, go off to the Geek in the Van area, and Sarah, thank you for being here. Mer, thank you for being here. And Liz, you have the con, as I said before.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Gray, for that lovely introduction. And yes, welcome, Sarah and Mer. I'm excited for this conversation with you. And I thought to kick things off that we could sort of dive a little deeper into the introduction part of things. So if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the projects that you're working on right now and how you chose to work on those projects, especially I think in 2020, everybody's time is precious, or needing to be spent on things that are that make you feel good. So I'm curious to hear how you picked the projects that you're working on now.
You want to go, Sarah?
Sure. So I didn't pick the project. I got invited to join Women at Warp, which had already been around for about 5 years, and they decided to expand the crew this summer. So I had gotten to know the crew at Star Trek Las Vegas the last couple of years. So I was one of the people they invited, which is nice because I haven't had to go through the experience of building a podcast from the ground up. Like, all the infrastructure was already there, and I just kind of have to show up, which is really nice.
Very nice.
And it's great to be part of a team that really works together and is really supportive of each other. We each kind of have our little niche. Like, I'm a bookkeeper by trade, so I do the finances now. Everyone contributes something to keep everything going. But yeah, so I did not pick the project. The project picked me, but I'm really happy to be here. And I've been guesting on podcasts the last couple of years, a lot of different Star Trek podcasts, but this is the first time I've been a co-host.
And what's that experience been like starting that this year? Has that has it made a difference that it's happening in 2020? Like, did you find yourself with different levels of free time to throw into this project?
So for me, because I'm freelance and I mostly worked from home already, my work actually didn't change that much. And for Women at Warp, they've always been located all over North America. So recording the podcast hasn't been that much work, or hasn't changed that much. But I think in this year, it's been really nice to have this time when I get together with friends and talk about Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when I even forget we're recording a podcast and I feel like we're just sitting around having a conversation that we'd be having anyways.
Right. And then Mer, how about you?
Well, I started my longest running podcast, I Should Be Writing, back in 2005. What I came up against was the podcast is for beginning writers, and I kind of have the feeling of, sometimes I have the feeling of, I've said everything I need to say to beginning writers. I've been saying it for 15 years. Not a lot's changed, but I have to remind myself that I get new listeners all the time. Not everybody wants to go back to 2005. Lord, trust me, you don't want to go back to 2005 and listen from then on. But also, I think I was just I felt really jealous of everybody who managed to, say, take pandemic time and create things, because I couldn't do it. And like Sarah said, I also work from home. So I was like, what's changed? Nothing's changed for me. And yet I was still really, really, I felt stifled. I couldn't think of anything to do and everything was suffering. And then in July, I decided to try out Twitch. First, I decided to do like a weekly AMA for my Patreon supporters. And then I thought, not a lot of them were taking advantage of it. And if I went to Twitch, I could probably reach my entire I Should Be Writing audience. And so I started live streaming the podcasts. So I live stream twice a week, and then I take the audio and put it in the feed. And it has basically breathed new life into my enjoyment for podcasting. It's also a lot less lonely. Never really thought about how, I've worked from home for years and years and years, but I also have friends who are freelance. And so I go out to lunch at least once a week with somebody, went out to lunch at least once a week with somebody. So I did not realize until I started communicating with people in real time on Twitch when I was podcasting that I missed that a lot. And so having a live aspect to my podcast has done amazing things for it. And I'm really, really loving it. And because, if you tell yourself I'm going to keep to a schedule, you can slip, but for some reason, it's like one important thing about Twitch is that you need to keep to a schedule. When I was doing all my research, that's like one of the first 5 things people tell you. If you want an audience, you need to be consistent. And so with that in mind, it's making me be consistent. So I'm getting 2 podcasts a week out now when I used to struggle with 1. So, the pandemic made me think sort of how I could alternate things. And really the first reason was for me, so I could focus on like differently. I felt like if I could just tilt things a little bit, I would get excited about something again. And I did. And I'm not even sure, because I'm not a neurologist or a psychologist, but it was around the time that I started to stream that I was able to start working on my book again, because I was really blocked this spring for an edit that I had to do. And I think just allowing me a different outlet for creativity helped release my writing as well.
Yeah,
what you asked.
No, that's amazing, and it's perfect. And it really resonated with me when you said that during this year of 2020 you had kind of encountered a block. And I found that and you said, people talked a lot about like, oh, everybody has so much more free time now, right? Because we're all kind of stuck at home. And I have found that I think I'm less efficient at just everything I do at home. So I don't have more free time at all, and I've been at times envious of people that had more forced scheduled things in their day, because I think that would have made me be more efficient. Instead, I'm like, well, I'm going to be at my computer for 14 hours a day. Like, I might as well just be working, even though I'm getting the same amount done as an 8-hour day. And I think the idea that doing Twitch, it made you accountable kind of to your audience. And I'm wondering, for both of you, like, has doing the podcast and then doing the Twitch stream had that impact of almost not quite replacing the visiting real people in real life that you had, but sort of you're having interactions with people that you might not otherwise go out of your way to schedule? Has that impacted kind of your mental health and your productivity? It sounds, for Mer, it sounds like it has.
No, definitely. It's I always feel great after I stream and I'm talking to people, whether it's, I still do just a general, just chatting AMA, and then I do 2 other streams for podcasting. But whenever just chatting with my audience, it's always nice. And, you're seeing the same people show up. And so you're getting to know them, or if you didn't know them before from like Discord or something, it's not quite replacing it, because at least in my situation, I know Sarah's different. I'm voice and they're not, but it's still interaction, and it's still an interaction. My husband and I are always very careful when we say this around each other, just basically like, I love you a lot, but I would like to talk to someone else at some point. And so this gives me, that he's got it at work, but I don't have it because I'm a writer. So this gives me that ability to talk to people. It's nice.
Yeah. And if Sarah, I can answer that question more in general, I'm finding this year, because we don't have cons where we go and we see all our friends, I was traveling probably once a month in the before times. But now I'm talking to people so much more, because it's so easy to hop on a call and talk to each other. I've had a weekly call with Star Trek friends this entire time, people that would normally only talk to once or twice during the year outside of the convention. I have a weekly call with my family. I have never talked to my family so much in my life, even when we live together. So this is, in that way, it's been kind of a blessing, because I feel more connected with certain friends than I did before.
Yeah, my family's the same way. WhatsApp, I've found, I have all these WhatsApp groups now where people are just constantly sharing things with each other, just to actually be talking to other people. So And Sarah, this might be more of a question for you, but it sounds like Women at Warp was already remote. So did you guys end up having to change a lot about the way you recorded when this started, or did it just sort of keep the same pace that it had?
So I actually joined officially in August is when we announced it. So I wasn't here when we actually switched into quarantine mode, but I don't think things really changed because everyone's been located West Coast, East Coast, Canada, in between. So I don't think there was a lot of adaptation going on there at all, no.
Yeah. See, I had a podcast that was always, we recorded live. And so then we thought, oh, well, maybe we'll try and do it remotely, but in actual play, sometimes if you're not used to that, it can be hard. And yeah, it's been an adjustment. And I know other people have had some projects that get kind of delayed, but it seems like the circumstances for both of you have allowed you to mostly seamlessly transition. Mer, with yours actually maybe improving a little bit your productivity in that area.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so sorry. I've noticed a lot of new podcasts popping up also, since not necessarily more time, but I think people are just more accustomed to being online now and talking online. So it's like, hey, let's just record it.
Right. Yeah, so kind of related to that, do you have any recommendations for people who are looking to record at home and maybe doing things remotely? Like I know, Mer, you had some thoughts about Twitch streaming, and it sounds like you did research with how to adapt your podcast recording to also using Twitch streaming. But I'm curious if there are other things that you recommend for people who are maybe used to just going over to somebody's house and recording, and now they have to start doing it at home, or they've been trying to do it at home.
Well, my general advice for beginning podcasters hasn't really changed, because I especially now that mics and headsets and cameras are just getting cheaper and cheaper. And you don't even need it. You can do it with your phone. For the beginning of the pandemic, before my daughter went away to college, where I am right now used to be her craft room. And so with the husband in the office and this room full of crafts, I would just take my phone outside and live stream with that, or with my laptop on my lap. But I don't recommend anybody sinking a lot of money into it, because you can. There's so many shiny things, and like one reason why I'm sticking with Twitch, besides the fact that I love it, is also the fact that I've spent money on this that I never spent on podcasting, and so I kind of want to make it worth my while. But with just starting out, you need something to record your voice and something and a place to put it. Mm-hmm. And those are either free in the way that you already have it, I'll bet, like your phone, or very inexpensive. So I just don't recommend anybody sinking a lot of money until you realize whether you like it or not. And then when you like it, there's all sorts of stuff out there. I finally bought lately I've been feeling so old woman shaking your cane at the clouds because of my experience with podcasting. I bought nice microphones and a mixer back in the day. And this was right before the first USB mic came out. So the mics were not made with the USB just to plug into your computer. So I had to get the mixer in the middle. And then I'm like, well, that would have been convenient, but I already have all this tech, so I'll use it. And then I just recently decided, no, I mean, it's been over a decade. I think I might deserve a new mic. So I got the shiny new plug straight into the computer mic. It's amazing. But yeah, it's something you can build your tech and your everything involved. You can build it slowly. Most of the things out there are free or cheap right now.
Yeah, I also actually just switched to a computer mic. I was recording through an H6 before that. So, and then Sarah, it sounds like you transitioned also from being like a sort of a regular guest on podcasts to, okay, now this is a more regular gig. So did you upgrade when you did that? Or did you change
I
anything?
did.
Yeah.
My laptop's camera was terrible, so I got a $25 webcam that I can plug in, and I upgraded to about a $25 headset. Um, it's something where being a regular, I want to just say to anyone who's thinking about starting a podcast for the first time, I totally agree with Mer 100%. Don't sink a ton of money into it. It's like anything else. It's a new hobby. You don't know if you're going to love it. Don't spend hundreds of dollars on it when it might end up like in a closet or something. So yeah, so easy to find equipment right now. Sorry, what was the original question?
The original question was, about setups for recording from home, but this is free and easy and you can talk about anything you want.
Yeah, when I started out, I was actually using an old Turtle Beach mic that someone gave me as a hand-me-down and a set of headphones that came with a guitar amp. Not the greatest sound, but it worked for being a guest on stuff. So, I mean, even just scrounge around and see what you have. But yeah, don't spend a ton of money. It's
Easy
until you know this is something you're going to be super serious about. Yeah.
Yeah, majority of the headphones that you can buy these days have a mic with them. So it's really, I mean, I think where you would spend the money might be on hosting, but even that's not that much. It's really not much more than web hosting. And I paid for my software because at the time that I was using the free Audacity, it was uneven on the Mac and it would crash a lot. And so I found another program that was like under $100, but had the same UI as Audacity. So I decided to invest in that and I'm very happy with that. So that's called Amadeus Pro if anybody's interested. But I heard Audacity is still doing fine and might be more stable on the Mac. Because again, I've been doing this a long time and I realized a lot of the decisions I made, the reasons I made them may not be there anymore, but I'm already set up. So why not?
Right. And it's not probably like people saw that you needed to make a change. It sounds like it was more you thinking, oh, okay, I deserve this, but no one thought, oh, her equipment sounds old,
Oh, right. No, definitely not.
So oh, go on.
I was just going to say, we record through Audacity and Zoom as a backup, but I don't use Audacity on Mac, so I can't speak to how that is these days.
Yeah, that has been an adjustment for me also, doing like having a Google Hangout or Zoom and then also recording into some other program. And I actually wear hearing aids, and so I rely a lot on lip reading when I'm talking to people. And so if the video connection is not great, then it causes, delays in the recording, and it's been interesting kind of adapting to that, and then everybody's dumping their audio into one person and hoping that it lines up as much as possible. So this is sort of on the other end of things, but I'm curious if your podcast listening habits have changed at all this year. So it sounds like both of you already worked from home, so maybe you didn't have like a commute that changed. But for me, just sort of the 2020 kind of politically and pandemic wise has impacted what I was seeking in media as well. And I'm curious if that's true for you.
It's embarrassing, but I haven't listened to a lot of podcasts. I started listening to audiobooks, so my podcast listening went down. And this was like a couple of years ago, but actually I'm listening to more now, mostly because I really enjoy the web browser phenomenon known as Blaseball. And so I've started following the first podcast that covers that. And the woman who does that is like 3 times a week when Blaseball's going on, and she's dedicated. It's amazing. And so that's been a lot of fun to get back into listening to somebody else do the work for once. That's the main one that I've been listening to. But every once in a while, I'll dip back into an old favorite like Productivity Alchemy. I see Kevin in the chat. Or crap, Manic Mondays, which is the funny music thing that Devo Spice has been doing for almost as long as I've been doing I Should Be Writing. So every once in a while, I'll get back into it.
So this one time in school, when we were kids, we took a test to see what kind of learner you are. Are you kinetic? Are you visual? Are you audio? And I scored really well on kinetic, really well on visual, and really poorly on audio. Like, I am just not a listener, so I'm embarrassed to tell you I don't really listen to podcasts. Like, I've occasionally, like on long road trips, I'll listen to like Welcome to Night Vale or something. But I don't drive anywhere anymore. Like, I generally don't go any further than the grocery store. Once a month, I have to drive somewhere at night, and it freaks me out because I don't know how to drive at night anymore. Yeah, so I guess my podcast listening, what little there was, has pretty much disappeared this year because I can't listen while I work and be able to pay attention to what's going on. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to use them at home, like when I'm doing errands and stuff like that, because kind of more like you mentioned, I love my husband and I would not prefer to be trapped at home with anybody else. But sometimes it's like, oh, I'm used to having a little bit of time. I was used to having a commute, or I was used to having some time when only one of us was at home. And that kind of like creates a little bit of a barrier. Like while I'm unloading dishes, I will also listen to a political podcast, which is my sad addiction. I'm going to try and wean myself off of those after this year. But so if podcasts are less your thing, it sounds like more audiobooks have been something that you've gotten into. I have way too many audiobooks on Audible. So I fully support and understand that. I've also become addicted. I used to be kind of devoted to like reading a paper book. And then once I found out I could just constantly be following the story while doing other things, it became hard to stop. So I'm curious, what has media been important to you more than usual this year? And if so, like, what have you kind of turned to?
I find I need my music or whatever I'm listening to calm me. Like, I just need to take the edge off my nerves. So I got addicted to like lo-fi hip hop playlists on YouTube, and also the ones that are like rainy day ambiance in a coffee shop or that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Those are on in my house while I'm working all day. And then when I am driving somewhere, I only listen to the classical radio station now. And it just needs to be something that takes away a little bit of the stress.
Right. Yeah. Did you do your Spotify end of year summary thing? Because they do something where they kind of like summarize the genres that you listen to throughout the year. And mine this year were all like basically lo-fi chill or like casual coffee shop, cozy, whatever. Yeah, that's all I can do.
Yeah,
mine was all TV soundtracks like Umbrella Academy and Russian Doll mostly. But then of course, because I would put the soundtrack on and just let it play, it counted some songs that I don't like at all as some of my top listened to because I couldn't get back to Spotify to skip it. And I'm like, no, I don't love the Doors that much. Stop. But it's I have been more dedicated to binge watching with my husband than we did before. Like he would have his shows and sometimes I'd be in the room and kind of watch over his shoulder, and then I have my shows, but we're it's not like we do anything differently because we don't do it during the day. We work during the day and then have dinner and then have free time, but for some reason we are spending more time together watching television. And I don't know why. Can somebody explain to me why the whole English cozy, yay murder, but it's wholesome, is a comforting thing? Because it is. It's really just all this murder is just so comforting. And we've been watching a lot of really old people murder mysteries. Let's watch our stories, honey. Let's get the murder on and just relax. And yeah, lots of murder.
Right.
I watched a lot of procedurals at first, and I think same thing with the murder mysteries. It's because you know they're going to figure out who did it. It's comforting because you know what's coming.
That's a really good point. I like that.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Sarah. And something we've gotten into over the past couple years is like English Escape to the Country is this like English house hunter show, but because they're English, it's so different. And they're also like, you know, I'm tired of living in London, and so we're going to go find a thatch roofed cottage somewhere. And I'm like, you know, like we're never going to look for a place like this, but for some reason it's soothing to like watch these other people pick which thatch roofed cottage they're going to move to. Yeah, there is something sort of agricultural and rural about a lot of English dramas too, I think. But yeah, I appreciate in fiction generally that there is a resolution. You know, I think at the beginning of 2020, it felt like I'm a person that really responds well to like, okay, we know this is the end of the thing. So then I just have to plan for what happens after the thing. And we just didn't have an end, right?
That is a really good point.
And with stories, there is an end, but that impacted me. You know, Unsolved Mysteries was less exciting to me than it used to be, for example.
I can see that.
Yeah. But and Umbrella Academy, did that new season come out this year? That was really fun. I liked that a lot. So, yeah. So I was going to ask what your favorite podcasts are, but it sounds like neither of you are super big podcast listeners, although some of the suggestions that you had were on point. I'm curious, how do you think there have been more new podcasts that have come up over this year, like you said, Sarah? I think that some people are just kind of like, well, we might as well record this. We're just having our conversations digitally anyway. What do you think the future kind of holds based on what has happened this year and probably what will continue to happen for the next 6 months or so, as far as people doing things remotely, including recording podcasts? Like prior to this, most of my podcast experience was in person. And so now it's kind of been interesting to think like, oh, we don't have to all be in the same place and we can make it work.
You know, one thing I noticed this year was a lot of celebrities starting their own podcasts, or celebrities that already had them, like putting more effort into them. So hopefully as, you know, the vaccine rolls out and they all go back to their day jobs, we see less of that. Because I think it's more interesting when podcasts are like the place that us ordinary people can say what we want to say. You know, it gives us a platform we don't normally have. And maybe it's gotten a little bit crowded when you have people come in who can right away get a lot of the attention. So
you don't want to compete with Michelle Obama.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a change I'm hoping to see next year. Nothing against celebrities having their podcast, because everybody has something to say. But I think it's more interesting when it's a more diverse group of voices.
I remember, I know this is somewhat related, but it's like I saw, I don't remember why, don't judge me, but I saw Justin Bieber's Twitter stream, and basically he'd said like good morning or something, and he had like 20,000 likes, and I'm like, he just said good morning. That is all. Why? But it's so, yeah, it's like they fart into a microphone and people will just be so excited. So yeah, this may sound like a bit of a downer, but I'm wondering how many will continue once life gets back to normal with commutes and things outside the house. Will they do things in person? Will they keep doing it because they love it? Or will the new change in life back to the old ways make them lose the time or the energy to do it? I am curious about that. But I don't know. I'm the worst futurist in the world. Like I'm the kind of, I used to work at a video game company, and they were coming out with a new game, and I thought that was a really stupid idea, and it was their biggest hit. And 20 years later, it's still coming out with the same game, and it's still a hit. And so I'm very bad at anticipating the future. But I think it is going to keep getting bigger. It's more accessible now. We say that every year, but it gets more accessible every year, which is great. Right. But I do believe there will be some pod fading. I don't know if the celebrities are going to do it or not. It's possible their publicists might say, no, this is good for your image. You have to keep doing it, but we'll see.
Yeah. If it makes you feel better, Mer, I thought iPads were never going to work. I remember when the first one came out, I was like, okay, so is it like a tiny computer? And they were like, yeah, but it's like, it does like what your phone does. So I was like, okay, so it's like a giant phone. And then can you make calls? No, you can't make calls. So I was like, it's a less useful giant phone. And
yeah. I was with you. I was with you. Very, very bad at anticipating Apple's innovative brilliance. Just, nah, that won't work. That sounds stupid. Oh, right. Wait, now I want one. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right that there are going to be some people who this was a habit that they developed during the pandemic or, 2020 generally for a variety of reasons. And once those reasons are not there anymore, maybe it won't be, it's hard. It takes a lot of dedication to actually produce and put out a podcast on a regular basis. Like you said, with Twitch, regularity matters. And, that's true with podcasts too. And I think we will probably see a drop off, and that's okay. Also, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have the pod fade because depending on why the podcast was put out there, a lot of us are recording for ourselves as well as for an audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like Sarah said, I hope a lot of the indies will stay doing it. I've loved watching podcasting grow over the past 16 years, but honestly, actually, is it the 9th? Yeah, I started podcasting this day in 2004. So yay,
happy anniversary.
But yeah, I always like hearing people picking up the new creative hobbies, any new creative hobby. It makes me happy because I think people who are creative are happier. Even if you suck at it, you're happier, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and I'm curious if, for people who are looking to get started in podcasting, I know you've been working on your podcast for a long time, and Sarah, you joined a podcast that was already, like an existing venture. But when people are looking to start something new, do you have any advice or thoughts on, like, is there anything new anymore? What is it that somebody can do to decide, do I bring something new to a conversation? Especially maybe people that have traditionally been like overrepresented in the past. Like, is there still room for somebody to come in and say, I'm going to start another podcast about board games or, Star Trek, whatever?
Sarah, I'm going to let you go first.
Well, I think it's just like any other media. If it's, writing or singing or making music, I think everyone has something to put out there. Maybe if you're a cishet white dude, don't start a podcast about, diversity issues. Sorry, there's been a whole thing in the Trek community lately about representation, and that's a whole other side topic I won't go into. But like, yeah, start it. If you're interested in something, if someone is interested in something, that's wonderful to see. So I have a fanzine coming out this month. I'm doing an issue of Journey Planet, and it's about collecting. And people have written articles about their collections. And I interviewed Shannon McGuire about her My Little Pony collection, which is incredible. And I sat there and we did a Zoom meeting, and I listened to her talk about My Little Ponies for over an hour. And it was like the shortest hour of my entire life because she's so passionate about it. So, I mean, find that thing you're passionate about, and people will be happy for you that you're happy about this thing. I have friends who know nothing about Star Trek, but will send me memes or something because they know that's something that will make me happy. So yeah, find your thing and talk about it and start your podcast. Go for it.
When When I was in college, I did an English major and I took a class on John Milton, Paradise Lost. Remember? Yeah. That was my favorite class of my entire college career because my professor was so passionate about John Milton. Everybody in the class was totally into it. We were just entranced with everything about Milton. And it's so funny in hindsight. I'm like, really? But then I remember the professor, and he was just, it was not a boring thing for him. He loved Milton, and he let us know. That's right. Sorry, chat My Little Pony to John Milton in less than 60 seconds. Yeah, this is something I'm actually struggling with myself, and I'm not going to get too personal here, but I think a lot of people want either permission or validation when they create, and you don't need that. Now more than ever, you don't need that for almost anything you can create. You don't need permission or validation. Sometimes that makes creating lonely. You know, there are a lot of podcasts out there right now. And as Sarah said, there's a lot of celebrities out there doing it, and people care more about a name they recognize than a name they don't. But that should not stop you if you're passionate about something and want to talk about something. Another reason I keep going is I'm passionate about helping new writers get their career started. And I can keep going on about that. I might retread old stuff, but I'll always be passionate about it. So yeah, it's, we used to say like, look for something that's not there and then make it, but you know, not even that. It's, you know, there's a book that's about a young woman who's rather powerful, who falls in love with a really old vampire, and he becomes obsessed with her. I could be talking about Twilight, or I could be talking about the Sookie Stackhouse series, or I could be talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was not a book, but stay with me, or I could be talking about Robin McKinley's Sunshine. All four of those books have that theme. And again, Buffy's not a book, but stay with me.
There's comics.
Yeah, there's comics. Thank you. But it's like they managed to tell four very different stories, but that's the core of the story. So yeah, you can make something that's like somebody else's thing, but your spin on it will be different. I mean, when I still laugh about the fact that when I started I Should Be Writing, to my knowledge, there was one other writing podcast. And I knew the creator of it, and I contacted him saying, you mind if I make one too? And just thinking about someone doing that now is laughable.
Right. That's amazing. And it's hilarious that you brought up the Milton example specifically, because my father took a class all about Paradise Lost. And the one piece of advice he gave me when I went to college was not to do that, because he was like, after 2 months, I was like, how can there be more? We can't keep talking about this. So I think that actually that kind of dovetails into the point you just made, though. Like, the big difference was probably the professor that you had. So like, you know, the message was impacted a lot by the passion that person had.
Also, it was all like a lot more than just Paradise Lost. So we didn't do.
Oh, yeah. No, this was, I guess, just a deep study of Paradise Lost.
That's a lot. Yeah. We did Paradise Regained and some political writings and some poetry, all that stuff. So
that's fun. So as far as, and we touched a little bit on representation, Sarah, and I know you were maybe not wanting to dive too deep into it, but I do think that's a really important topic. And especially when we're talking about, new podcasts that are being created and just, the voices that we're listening to in 2020, I do think representation is really important. So I'm curious, do you have any additional thoughts on that you care to go into? Or Merl, I was wondering, as an editor, does that, like, are you able to kind of use that role to elevate specific voices?
You mean in Escape Pod?
Yes.
Okay, we've worked very hard to address the issue of marginalized voices on Escape Pod. Step one has been our slush readers, because if everybody reading the new stuff coming in is all of one group, when you get a story about a trans person or a Black person, or it's like they're going to be like, oh, I don't relate to this. I don't. So first thing is I don't relate, and then that's already a negative feeling, and then it's like, I don't really like it, and so then it's reject. So when you put people from many different backgrounds on your slush team, you can make sure that if somebody reads something, it's like, you know what, I'm not sure this was written for me. Let's see what they think. And you can pass it around and get lots of different voices on it. And that's been a big help for us. We pay attention to the Black Speculative Fiction Report every year and see where we can do better. It's very important to us. So yeah, I know if my co-editor were here, she'd remember a lot more stuff that we're doing because she's the organized one. But yeah, we've been trying to be very aware of it, and aware of implicit bias too. A lot of people say, well, don't fill a quota. It's like, it's not filling a quota, it's acknowledging that you're automatically going to skew towards something that's like you, and you should not do that. So you need to make sure you look at the stories that don't fully resonate with you and your experience. So we try really hard to do that.
Yeah, I think a thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your ability to look at your media and see a lack of diversity has been trained out of you by all of the media you consumed growing up, because your media was heavily male and your media was heavily white. And that's going to go for most people in North America. So it's something you have to work at. First of all, you're not naturally colorblind as much as you would like to think you are. You should make an effort to have diverse voices in your conversation. In normal times, I run a series of charity events called Nerd Camp, and they're sort of like mini conventions with maybe like 100 people in a small venue. And one of my rules is that if you have a panel, first event, I said you have to have at least one woman, you have to have at least one person of color on your panel, and then realize, oh, that's way too easy. So let's double that and make it 2. And that was still doable. And yet we see a lot of cons that can't do that, apparently. So it's an effort you have to put in. It's not something that's going to come to you naturally when you're setting things up. And it's something you should do, because it is something that a lot more people are aware of these days. If you have a Star Trek podcast and it's all white people, I just don't even bother listening to it, because I know you're going to miss like half the perspective on a show. So
and you will have heard it before. Excuse me.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. So yeah, it's something that takes effort, but it's something that you have an obligation to do.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. I don't cover a lot of interviews on I Should Be Writing anymore, but I don't think he's listening, but or watching. But my co-host on Ditch Diggers, which is my other podcast, I do with my friend Matt Wallace. We try very hard to pay attention when we have guests on. We try very hard to look for marginalized voices, because I can tell from looking at the publicists' emails that come in is that white dudes, they're okay. They might specifically think me, I'm not okay, but it's like overall, the publicists are working their butts off to promote your books. And we kind of sometimes want to focus on other people who the publicists may not be amplifying. So we work hard on doing that. We are fully aware that we are 2 white cis het people, and try to branch out through the guests.
Yeah, I think well said from both of you. And I do think it's important to address and to be thinking of when people, especially when people are creating new podcasts now, that yes, on the one hand, it's nice for it to be like just you and your friends talking, but if you really are seeking to put a message out there, like that is something that you have to consider as part of your message. And if, just you and your friends talking is only going to be, straight white people, then maybe you have to try a little bit harder to diversify who you and your friends talking is. So, and I know we're getting a little bit closer to the end of the time. So I wanted to kind of open the floor up a little bit and see if you have anything else that you wanted to talk about related to podcasting in general and podcasting in 2020 specifically.
I just realized that people watching may not be familiar with our podcasts that we've been talking about kind of, tangentially. Would you mind if we just talked about our podcast a little bit?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't mind, so please do.
I'm on Women at Warp, and we are on a mission to explore intersectional diversity and infinite combinations. And so we talk about different aspects of Star Trek each week through an intersectional feminist lens. So it might be about, like, recent episodes have been about body diversity. We've got one coming up on pandemics in Star Trek. All kinds of fun perspectives. We have, 54 years of Star Trek to wade through with different levels of cringe factor. So it's a lot of fun for us, and hopefully it's fun for people to listen to. And you can find us. Our website is womenatwarp.com, and we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Women at Warp. And we have some merch on Teespring.
Oh, nice.
Fun. I like that.
I do a solo show on Twitch called I Should Be Writing, which is just it's for beginning writers. But in addition to craft, I talk a lot about all of the little things that I call it the bully. Some people call it the inner editor. I call it a bully because that's what it is. All the things the bully whispers to you, especially at the beginning of your career when nobody else is around to tell you, hey, that bully's wrong. And I've heard so many authors say they've had the same fears or stuff that stopped them or might have tried to stop them early on, that I realized that these fears it's almost textbook. It's almost a checklist you can go down that you're going to hit at the beginning of your career. And I try to address that and let people know that it's okay. It's okay to get rejected. It's okay to get rejected more than once. It's okay to get a mean rejection. It's okay to think about writing a different story when you're writing the story that you were once passionate about, and not so much after 10,000 words. And I talk about mental health because I hate the romantic view of the tortured artist, because it's destructive. And someone's like, well, if Van Gogh had antidepressants, he might not have painted whatever. And I'm like, why in the world do you need Van Gogh's painting and have a man have a tortured life? Why is that more important than him having a good life? I don't care if he wouldn't have painted that. Really, it's if there was just a happy man in the past, that's great. But no, we need the art. No, we can create art just fine while dealing with whatever mental health problems we have. I am not a doctor, and I try to say that frequently, but I have benefited from getting some mental health help. And I try to encourage, if anybody's having problems, maybe question it, maybe talk about it with your GP, and then maybe move on and talk about it with another professional. But I'm very passionate about that, because I hate the idea of people thinking, well, if I go on antidepressants, I will lose my creativity. It's not true. Mm-hmm. And my other podcast is called Ditch Diggers, which my friend Matt Wallace and I started because there's nothing out there to tell people how business works for writers. If you're lucky enough to have an agent, great. The agent can help you with that. But the agent, you know what? They're not going to teach you how to fire an agent. And they're not going to help you, usually not going to help you find an agent. And we just try to cover how to be a professional writer on the business end. Matt's very strict rule is no craft talk. So if I ever stray into that, we get pulled back. But overall, we just try to we talk to people about lessons learned. We found some people who were very willing to be open about bad things that have happened to them with publishers or editors or whatever. I recently had an agent situation that I'm looking forward to talking to on Ditch Diggers, because after doing this podcast and you know, being pretty mid-career in my writing life, I didn't know something could surprise me, and something did. And I'm like, okay, well, this is something else we need to talk about, because it's like I got an MFA in pop fiction, and I said, are you guys going to talk about anything like business-wise, like how to find an agent or how to research an agent or how to read a contract? And they're like, no, we do the craft here. You can learn that out there. I'm like, from whom?
Right.
So that's why we started Ditch Diggers. And the concept is, why we call it Ditch Diggers is, when you're a working writer, you have to work, you have to write. You don't have the luxury of needing inspiration to do it, because you have a deadline and you got to work, and ditch diggers don't get ditch digger block. And so you need to get to work. If you're a working writer and have a deadline, you need to get to work. So yeah, that's my two shows. And then there's Escape Pod, which is a free science fiction podcast magazine, one story a week. And I do that with SB Divya. We're co-editors, and that's been around also for 15 years. We just celebrated our 15th year anniversary and put out our first anthology, which was very exciting. And yeah, so those are the three I work on.
So then as far as starting off point, like for your podcast, does it matter? You know, you mentioned that maybe someone doesn't need to go all the way back to 2004 to learn about your current perspective on being a new writer. Is there like a specific jumping out in point that you recommend?
For ours, we're up in like the 150s now, and they're pretty much all standalone. I think there might be a couple that's like this part 2 to something we did 2 years ago or something, but for the most part, just jump in with whatever looks interesting to you. And I forgot to mention earlier, if you listen to our podcast, or if you don't and you're interested in checking us out, we're having a holiday get-together on Saturday, this coming Saturday the 12th. It's going to be at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, 8 p.m. UK. It's on Zoom, but you can find the event on Facebook. Just search for Women at Wassail, because we also like terrible puns. And yeah, we'll put the Zoom link in the Facebook event just before it starts.
Yeah, and maybe we can get that in the chat too for this, so you can a link to the event. Not the Zoom link. Yeah.
Ours are pretty standalone as well. Every once in a while I might do a series in I Should Be Writing. In September I did I decided to I knew it was ambitious and I knew it might have been a bad idea, but I decided to outline a new book using 3 different outlining techniques to show people what the outlining techniques were. And so jumping in on that might not be the best place, because it was very specific and not very chatty. So, you know, starting that at the beginning might be more accessible to you, but really it's any of them really. It's we try to do standalones, and sometimes we'll refer back to old episodes, but not often. And I think on Escape Pod we have a best of or readers favorite site. If you're a page, if you're looking to where to get started in reading or listening to that, you can look and see what is best indicative of Escape Pod.
Great.
And if we do a multi-part story, we'll also mention this is part 2. You need to go back to part 1 last week, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I figured, Sarah, with Women at Warp, the ones that are continuations from a year ago, they'd probably say, go back and listen to this episode first. Yeah. Well, great. I think we are just about at time. So I've really enjoyed talking to both of you. And I think, Gray, if you want to hop back in here. Oh, there he is.
Say my name and I shall appear.
Wow.
That's actually not as scary as it sounds.
It was like instantaneous, though.
Are you like Janet?
Yeah, how I wish. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Not a man, not a robot. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. This has been great. I was actually friends with the founder of Escape Pod back in the day, so I actually, hearing this stuff was great. And Mer, I actually went and got my cane that I shake as well, because I do that too. You know, the old days of hand coding your own RSS feed and stuff.
Old school.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I will also say that the one thing you do have to do before you listen to some episodes of Women at Warp is you have to have watched the Star Trek episodes that they're talking about, because a lot of that happens, and that's where I get to enjoy both sides of that. Thank you so much for doing all this. We have in the last hour raised another $1,000 in our fundraiser.
Yay! Awesome.
So thank you to all of our donors. Remember that every $10 you put in gets you a chance to get a prize from our prize draw. And I also want to say we still have an auction going on, auction.worldbuilders.org. You can see some amazing stuff, including a 1950s era typewriter signed by Neil Gaiman. So if you're looking for a talisman for your writing, that would be the thing. Or we also have a dress worn by, handmade and worn by Mary Robinette Cole for the Chicago Worldcon. So, and that has a picture of her wearing it, standing next to Neil Gaiman. I'm forced to say, for legal reasons, Neil Gaiman is not included in the auction. So thank you all so much for coming by. I appreciate your help a lot. And we at World Builders are immensely grateful. If there's everything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. We hope to see you all again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry, you say something, Liz?
No, I was going to wave,
okay.
But then you kept talking.
Excellent. All right,
No,
well, we will close out with our magic word slightly changed. We used to say Viva Moose every single time, but instead we're going to say Potamoose. And then we look in the chat to see when people repeat it. If they do. And if they don't,
are we here forever if they don't?
There we are. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.